Greetings, seekers, wanderers, and scholars of the arcane. You've just crossed the threshold into a world beyond the mundane, a realm where science meets spirit, where tradition intertwines with rebellion. Welcome to the Augustus Grigori channel. My name is Augustus Grigori, your guide and fellow traveler on this esoteric journey. Are you new to the hidden wisdom of the ages or a seasoned practitioner? Fear not, for this channel serves as a sanctuary for both the novice and the adept. So today's episode won't be a regular episode, rather a different series called Augustus Talks. This will be a separate video from my usual content, and it will be more of a video of shared thoughts on specific topics. So don't worry, the Asmodeus video is still on its way, though I figured that providing content in between wouldn't hurt. I've noticed that this channel continues to grow, and I feel it's fair to continue providing some sort of information or value while bigger projects are still being created. Today's episode on Augustus Talks is Psychedelics and the Occult. Sharing my experiences with psychedelics such as psilocybin, LSD, and my most recent trip on DMT, also known as dimethyltryptamine. I want to make an important disclaimer. The content of this video is intended solely for educational purposes. It's important to understand that I do not encourage nor endorse the use of narcotics, illegal substances, or any controlled substances. The experiences I share here are my own and are shared with the goal of providing information and insight only. Remember, engaging with such substances can have legal and health implications, so this video is not meant to influence or condone their use in any way. Please make informed and responsible choices. Thank you for watching and stay safe. Alright, so with that disclaimer out of the way, I want to introduce this new format of, I guess, like a little mini-series called Augustus Talks. Now, originally I was going to script this and have a whole script written down that I can read over and talk to you a little bit about whatever the episode was going to be about. And I attempted doing this with this episode, but it didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. And I just realized that when it comes to me talking about things, specifically things that are not really meant to educate you, but just to share an experience, I can't rely on scripts as much because you're not getting the true raw emotion that's really coming out of what I want to say. I'm trying a little bit too hard and sounding good rather than sounding real. So I'm going to try this where I'm speaking from my mind and capturing it to the best of my ability rather than just try to write it down and make it sound like articulate or sound sophisticated. I think truthfully, you're not going to get much out of it if that's the case. So this is episode 1 of Augustus Talks. We're going to be talking about psychedelics and how the occult plays into it, as well as sharing my own experiences on specific psychedelics. So I've seen a lot of videos on psychedelics, specifically on the topic of shrooms, LSD, and DMT. And I see a lot of trip reports and firsthand experiences, mainly from YouTubers that are specifically catered towards psychedelic substances. And if it's not that, it's usually going to be in the form of a podcast where two people are just talking, and they come from backgrounds that are not necessarily from the occult. They're usually high-performing entrepreneurs or artists and other types of professors or scholars in their specific field of study. And I want to share a little bit more about the application of psychedelics in the occult, as opposed to just going off of what everyone else talks about. I mean, there's like a bunch of episodes on like the Joe Rogan podcast, for example, that talks about DMT. I mean, I'm sure if you're watching this video, there's a good chance you've probably seen a few clips or actual episodes of the podcast with certain interviewees in the podcast, and they're sharing their experiences on specific substances. Joe Rogan loves talking about DMT, and there was this episode of, I think, Mike Tyson talking about it and talking about 5-MeO DMT, which is a variation of it that is extracted from the venom of a specific toad. And we hear about all these stories, and we hear about the ego deaths that people go through, the realizations that they come across, and they're waking up to reality that they experience after taking these drugs. And I want to dive a little bit deeper and talk about the application of psychedelics in the occult, as well as sharing what I think. So with that being said, I just want to let you guys know that this is UPG. This is unverified personal gnosis, and my channel is full of it. So if this is something that doesn't work for you and you don't care about UPG, you're not going to find much value in this channel. But if you are looking to see the experiences, or hear the experiences of other practitioners and sharing their own personal experiences on things, and this is the place for you. Now, I myself, I wouldn't say I'm a psychonaut myself. I've taken a few psychedelics, so I'm certainly no expert. I'm not an expert, and I'm only basing things off of my own understanding, based off of my own firsthand experience. So, I'm not reading any books. I'm not reading any clinical studies. I'm not borrowing ideas from other papers. I'm just simply speaking what I've experienced firsthand and trying to interpret it based off of everything that I know so far. So, I don't know where to start, because I want to talk about my experiences on psychedelics, but in order for me to get there, I think what's important is talking about how I view psychedelics and where I see psychedelics applying itself into the occult. Now, it's really funny I'm saying that, because psychedelics have honestly been like a foundational part of the occult for as long as the occult has existed. I truly believe that if it weren't for psychedelics in the first place, I don't think we really would have these kinds of esoteric practices or these spiritual experiences as often as people experience. I feel like psychedelics offer a gateway to these altered states of reality, and usually that kind of altered state, or that ability or that privilege to talk to a spirit or a god or a goddess or have these sorts of experiences, are usually reserved for specific people, mainly people who are incredibly devoted to their practice, or people who, meditate a lot or fast a lot, or chosen prophets of a specific god or a goddess or entity. And I think that they're able to tap into these realities, or at least tap into these states based off just who they are. And that doesn't really make it available for the general public, but with the use of things such as psychedelics, you're able to tap into those things. Some might disagree with me on that, but this is sort of how I see reality. You and me, we only see reality as our eyes, and our eyes, nose, mouth, ears can sense it, whatever our five senses can sense. And it depends on how you're experiencing this video. For example, you might be in front of a computer screen like a laptop, or you might be in front of your phone, and you might be looking into this screen right now, listening to my voice and seeing the video in front of you. Or chances are you might not be looking at the screen. It might be in your phone and you're just letting it play in the background as you listen to my voice speaking about this topic. Now, you know that I'm speaking to you. You see the reality that is you experiencing this video, but it's not like you're seeing me necessarily speak about this right now in the now. Like right now, what I'm doing right now is sitting in my car and recording my voice and having this whole video being created. And this is before its final conception, which you are watching right now or listening to right now. And this is my layer of reality that oftentimes people don't see. So you only see what's physically in front of you. And that's kind of how I see the universe and psychedelics. You know, I like to think of it this way. Like, think of the universe as like a sandwich. One with deli meats, cheese, tomato, lettuce, sauce, sandwich between bread. Now, think about each ingredient being separated by like a parchment paper or a piece of wax paper in between. So between the deli meats and the cheese, you have like a piece of wax paper. Between the cheese and the tomatoes and the lettuce, you have a piece of wax paper. And like to separate the ingredients. They're still a part of the sandwich. They still make up a sandwich, but it's because of these sheets. It's preventing the ingredients from interacting with each other or touching each other. Now, if you try to take a bite of that sandwich right now, you're going to have a very inconsistent bite. Chances are you might just get the bread, you might get a piece of deli meat, you might not even get the veggies or the sauce or the cheese or anything because you have these pieces of wax paper in the way. Chances are you might even have a bite of wax paper in your mouth too, so it's not going to be the most pleasurable bite. So you can't experience the full sandwich. Now, if you were to take out those sheets of wax paper or parchment, then that's when the ingredients start interacting with each other. You have the deli meat and the cheese interacting with each other. You have the cheese and the lettuce and the tomato interacting with each other, and they're all touching each other. And when you take a bite, you get this mix of flavors. You're not just tasting the deli meats, you're tasting the cheese and the lettuce, the onions and the tomato. I don't even know why I mentioned onions, and the sauce, and then the bread. And I like to think of our reality being like we're in the bread and the deli meat, but we're not quite there yet to the cheese and the lettuce, tomato, and the sauce. And we're all still a part of the sandwich, but it's because of these veils of wax paper that we're not able to see what's occurring on the same field, but just on a different plane of existence. And that's kind of how I see our reality. It's the same thing with like spirits. Like you and me know, if you are someone who believes in what I believe, there are spirits walking among us. They walk the streets just like us. They fly around. They're on a different plane of existence, but they're also operating within this three-dimensional space sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. They're not bound to the confines of the physics that go within our plane of reality, but they themselves are eclipsed in our reality too. And so people are able to look and interact with them if they're able to look past that veil, aka that parchment paper / wax paper. So I like to think that psychedelics are kind of like the hand that pulls out these veils. Just like how when you take a psychedelic, I feel like the veil is lifted off and suddenly you're interacting with this other plane of existence. It's not just something that's in your head, but it is something that has always been around. It's just that we don't have that privilege to interact with it based off of our limitations as physical humans, or limitations based off of our normal baseline brain function. And I say this because you hear about these trip reports of specifically DMT. I think DMT is a really good example. It's not like everyone has like a completely unique experience on DMT. They do. It's just not what I'm talking about specifically. I'm talking about things such as the similarities that we share when we are on these substances. For example, machine elves or DMT elves or jesters or whatever you want to call them. There's always these similar reports of people who take DMT or ayahuasca or some form of DMT. They talk about these experiences of entities such as machine elves. Like it's such a popular concept. Now, there have been some discussions about this and shared opinions and thoughts on this, where people believe that we just see we're seeing these entities because everyone else is talking about it, and because we collectively talk about it subconsciously, that's what we believe, and then when we take the substance, that's what we see. I want to say maybe that's a possibility, but I also want to say that collectively, I think that just like how religion is, and people share these same spiritual experiences of their own religion, I think that there is some truth to it, and that maybe we are not just confirming what our subconscious is saying, but I do genuinely believe that when we're taking a substance like this, like DMT, that we are actually being not necessarily transported to another dimension, but the veil is being lifted off, and we are observing this dimension that exists with us and is something that we don't see on a daily basis. And that's why we're able to share these similar experiences. I honestly think it's more like that these machine elves, they walk around and they interact in their own specific plane of existence, and that we ourselves are just unaware of it unless we are under the substance, or if we are privileged enough to have the ability to see them without needing said substance. And because of that, we ourselves, because we have these shared experiences, we can confirm that there is something beyond just our immediate reality. And if you are an occultist, you like someone who practices and works with spirits, you should know this by now. You should know that there is something beyond our existence that we don't normally interact with, or if we do interact with it, it's usually under a specific circumstance or a specific environment. And I think that psychedelics do that very thing for us. And to confirm that, really, just look at shamans. Shamans, they don't just work with nature spirits, but they work with nature themselves. Nature being the use of herbs, tonics, and yes, psychedelics. You hear about specific shamans and practitioners that create the concoction of ayahuasca to create these sacred medicines for people to ingest and take and go on this spiritual journey for hours on end and confront their greatest fears, or confront something that's keeping them perpetually stuck in a cycle that's sabotaging them. It's a form of magic. Truthfully, it's a form of magic. And contacting your ancestors or these spiritual elders under this substance, like this is kind of like the foundational pillar of practice for a number of shamanic practices. And because that's so prominent, the use of psychedelics, the use of specific drugs, I guess that's the best way to say it, ultimately shows this strong, incredibly important link with the occult and these altered states of consciousness. And honestly, here's the thing about psychedelics. Like, he's not really the best example, but he's a good example nonetheless. Aleister Crowley. Say what you want about him. I don't really have much of an opinion of the guy, but the dude's got a hard drug problem. Dude was furiously addicted to opium, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. I want to talk about the less harmful substances, specifically cannabis, which he used a lot, and mescaline, which is peyote. He's taken other things such as absinthe and ether, but first off, absinthe is not a psychedelic, it's an alcoholic drink. And ether, I mean, no comment on that. I don't really know much about it. But I myself, I've had experiences with cannabis. I regularly smoke it. I've been on long breaks from it, and I started getting back into the practice of it because I feel like it helps with hitting some altered states. Do I depend on it? No. I don't think we should be depending on specific substances, but it is good for a tool, just like how specific tools in your ritual can completely transform how you experience a ritual, and I think psychedelics are just that. So Aleister Crowley, he's done peyote, he's taken mescaline for his magical operations, and I mean, I haven't read his accounts, but I'm sure that he himself has experienced a lot on this and has been able to, I guess, verify his own UPG, or create his own UPG, really, through these personal experiences. And we all know the reputation this guy has. I mean, the guy's got like 1 million books. People follow him like crazy, and some people don't follow him, whatever. But this is one of it's one of the things that made me raise an eyebrow and just made me think like, okay, well, magical practice and the occult have such a huge link to each other, but why isn't it being talked about as much as the mainstream use of psychedelics is? Well, I mean, we're seeing this in podcasts and people saying that they're talking to these spirits and entities. Why aren't we hearing about the occult interactions that people have? And I think mostly because, number one, the occult is not very mainstream. People just don't talk about these things, and first off, they're going to call you crazy or schizophrenic. So I get that. And I guess people just want to hear from celebrities and their experiences, and to look at it almost like it's their silver bullet to facing their own bullshit, I guess. So to each of their own, right? But this is why you're here. You're here because you want to hear about occult specific experiences. So let's talk about what I've been through, and I'll share a little bit about what I've been experiencing myself and what I have experienced. So I've done the big three, and those big three being psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, LSD or acid, and DMT. I've done mushrooms a number of times, especially during the pandemic. I've done LSD literally once, but honestly, once was enough. And then I've done DMT like twice. So it may sound like I'm very experienced, but the truth is I'm not. DMT, honestly, these two specific trips, it's literally been a week since I've had them. So it's still really fresh in my mind. LSD I've done in a little bit around the end of lockdown during the pandemic in 2020. Shrooms I've done before the lockdown and during the lockdown in 2020. So it's really not that long ago, and I am by no means even close to the experience of some of these psychonauts. So I am not Terrence McKenna by any chance. I'm not even Joe Rogan. I'm not Duncan Trussell. I'm neither of these people. So bear with me. I'm just speaking based off of my own experiences. So before I talk about DMT, which is something I've been really wanting to talk about, I want to talk about my past experiences and my own interactions. So I've had some recurring themes of my trips, and usually they've stemmed from the same thing. Now from an outsider standpoint, one might interact with what I have to say and think, well, this is a recurring pattern, and you're being tasked to face this specific thing and heal from it. And I agree with that partially. Rather, I believe that my experiences are independent of their own, and the pattern exists not because of some unresolved work, but rather the timing of it has anchored it in a way where it's almost like a spiritual tool for insight. So in the beginning, when I started doing psychedelics, I was actually at a very difficult time in my life. So you're going to learn a little bit about me today. A little bit before the pandemic, a family member, specifically my father, he was dying of a terminal illness. And it was a really aggressive terminal illness. It wasn't supposed to have him go so quickly, but he went quickly. And if you, by any chance, like if you have a past loved one, you'll know that, especially if it's like a parent, you'll know that you don't just deal with the grief. You deal with a multitude of responsibilities, both new and old. So, for example, the patriarch of the family, aka my dad, when he passed away, I had to take the mantle of a lot of our familial titles. I had to take care of the assets in our family. There was a lot I had to take care of which honestly I believe is at a very young age. Like most people, when they come to experience such a loss in their life, specifically the passing of a parent, you really won't see this until you're in your 40s or your 50s most of the time. And for me, at my age, to be able to experience that was hugely shocking because for, like, you know, most of my friends, they couldn't relate. All their families, like their parents are still alive, very much alive. And so the growing up I had to do was much more accelerated than I originally expected. And I gotta say, it was pretty overwhelming. I can't go without saying that. And I think around that time when I realized that he was dying and there was only a finite amount of time that I get to be with him, I was looking for answers. I was looking for a silver bullet. My ego was looking for quick fixes to things. So I didn't approach psychedelics in the healthiest manner. I looked at them as tools or like shortcuts to get to a certain state and kind of like move on from it and be able to be a master of everything. You know, it's kind of that's kind of the story that gets sold sometimes through these podcasts or through these stories from successful people like entrepreneurs. You hear about the CEO who goes into the Amazon and, you know, takes ayahuasca and suddenly all the answers are presented to them. And now they're like a huge award-winning author. They're making billions of dollars, et cetera, just because they took this magical plant. That's really what I thought, honestly. And I couldn't have been so wrong. I was so wrong. So, mushrooms. Just to clarify and disclose some information about me. Now, when it comes to access to psychedelics, I always made sure that the access I had was 100% safe, that the substance that I was taking was 100% safe. Now, I live in an area where where cannabis is 100% legal. We have dispensaries everywhere. I live in the Pacific Northwest, if you're wondering where I am. It is completely legal, and you know, you can go to a store and you can buy herb, you can buy vape cartridges, you can buy tinctures, tonics, oils, phoenix tears, edibles. You can buy anything that you can think of that can be infused with cannabis. It's there. It's regulated by the government, and it's super easy to get a hold of. Now, there's something really funny about this. There's a weird gray area in the legal system here where there's recently been a bunch of pop-up dispensaries, but they're not dispensing cannabis. What they are dispensing are psilocybin mushrooms. And later on, they started to get a little bit more gutsy and sell things over the counter, such as LSD, kratom, peyote, and DMT in various forms. So because of that, we're able to access these safer drugs, essentially. And considering where my area is and where I live, there is a fentanyl crisis. And so it can be really scary to get a hold of certain substances without that risk lingering, bothering, nagging at you and bothering and lingering in your head. So it's really important that you get some clean stuff if you are planning to get into this. So I was lucky. Where I am, my circumstance and my environment, I was very lucky. I'm very privileged, and I will not put that lightly. I was very lucky. So getting mushrooms from a reputable source, from a safe source, it was everything. So very grateful for that. I was able to buy a couple of grams of golden teacher mushrooms, and those were my first ever experiences. Some people say that golden teachers are like a beginner's shroom. Now, I don't know. I've only had golden teachers. I've never had anything else. But let's just say that the shroom trip was pretty interesting. My first trip, honestly, wasn't the best trip. It kind of sucked. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I had a friend who I really wanted them to be my trip sitter for this experience. And honestly, he was an awful trip sitter. The dude just lacked any sort of awareness in this case. He was like scaring me about COVID back then. It was really funny. He was talking about Italy's situation. This was like early on before the pandemic, and he was like, it was just not a good time to disclose this kind of information while I was tripping. So you can imagine I was pretty damn anxious. I wouldn't say it was a bad trip. In fact, it wasn't a bad trip at all. It was just a very challenging trip. I don't really believe in bad trips. I just believe that there are challenging trips that we just have to surrender to. My first trip was kind of interesting because I saw some visuals, but at the same time, they weren't really as strong as how I wanted them to be. I remember looking at the walls on Shrooms, and it looked like these tribal entities. And when I mean tribal, I mean they look like humans. They're humanoid, and they look like they're wearing tribal wear. And they were like kind of looking at me like the wall was a window, and they were like observing me. I think that's what I was seeing. And I just thought it was really interesting. It felt like I was being watched. And I really wanted to just surrender to the experience and just kind of see what I wanted to see what I was being shown, and feel what I was being shown as well. And my trip sitter was not making it any easier. And I just wanted to be alone. I remember asking him if I could just like chill in his bedroom for a bit and just lie down on the mattress and just like trip alone and just be left alone. Because like all I wanted at that moment was just to be left the fuck alone and just have that experience without being fear-mongered. And come to some conclusions and learn and see what these teachers had to say. Now, unfortunately, I didn't really realize much. I just had a trip, honestly. It felt no different than, let's say, getting really high off of weed, like taking a really heavy dab, honestly. And it was kind of disappointing. But I said to myself that I would revisit this. Excuse me. Oh, God, I just burped. Oh, that was gross. Sorry about that. But, geez, that was gross. But, yeah, I wanted to revisit this. So, okay. then came the time where I really wanted to start visiting it better. Now, I started to take doses at home and trip alone. I did the lemon tech method, and if you don't know what the lemon tech method is, you would soak the bits of the mushroom in lemon juice, and it's supposed to hit harder and hit faster when you drink it. So you would extract the psilocybin using this as a method in making tea. So I would make a tea from it. I had this coconut husk tea that was really gentle and not too overpowering, and I would mix that with the mushrooms, and it was a really great base, and I was able to trip really nicely with it. Now, that was what I was doing. So my father was in hospice, and he was deteriorating rapidly. And for me, even though that wasn't really the healthiest of intentions, I was using the mushrooms as a means to cope with this loss, because the loss was not only happening so quickly, but at the same time, things were starting to shut down in the city, and so the distractions were very minimal. I was tasked to face the reality of what's happening in my family, and you thinking that mushrooms would be like helping you escape is a huge no, because in fact it will actually magnify it even more and make you realize it even harder than you originally planned. So bully on you for realizing that, Augustus. You're crazy. Anyways, I started to take these gentle small trips, not enough for me to really experience anything, but it actually helped quiet the voice in my head that was trying to fearmonger me, and actually helped me be in touch with my emotions and allowed me to grieve properly, to which I owe the mushrooms a lot. I felt like I was able to expedite my grief process because of it, and I was able to learn to grow from it. Now, if you ever lost a parent, you know that the grieving process never really goes away. You just learn how to not survive. You just learn how to live. You just learn how to live beyond it and learn how to process those emotions. And when those emotions come back, you're just better tasked to processing it and being there for yourself. That's just the truth. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was early noon, and hospice called me and suggested that we come quick right away because it was happening. And what they meant by what it was happening was he was dying. He was going to die. And I remember hailing an Uber to the hospice, and we ended up getting to the hospice, and I remember walking into that room and seeing his lifeless body on the hospital bed, and he actually looked really peaceful, and it was a tough pill to swallow. I could definitely feel that he wasn't physically there. Or, I mean, his body was physically there, but his presence, his real spirit, who he is and what he embodies, it just wasn't there. And I remember there was a priest that is like, there's a live-in priest in this hospice, and he would pray for the patients there, because if you're in a hospice, you're not going out, you're not leaving the hospice. You're gonna pretty much die there. It's end of life care. And he told me he passed away funnily enough at 11 a.m. and the priest was reciting the Lord's Prayer as he was passing away, and then he drew his last breath. I think truthfully he didn't want to pass away with us present, so I think it was a huge privilege to have the priest there and I think that was exactly how he wanted to go. I didn't think he would want us to be present when he draws his last breath. I just out of respect and out of dignity. Anyways, after that whole thing was done, we had to make the arrangements for his burial right then and there. We had to talk to a funeral director. I was very, very lucky. I have a family member who is a funerary director, so it made this whole situation much, much, much easier and much faster and much more cost effective, sure. So I remember coming home, and there was this dead silence in this house, in my home. And I knew that, number one, I had to take care of myself. I couldn't just be a mess and just lose myself just because of what happened. So I had to be there for myself. So I wanted to make some lunch. I didn't even eat that day. So I needed some lunch. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to take some mushrooms today. I'm going to take a full dose and have whatever happen and let me grieve the way that I need to, because I felt like emotionally I was really locked up. I didn't cry, I didn't shed a tear. I just felt so numb, and I didn't know if that was normal. In fact, I was kind of questioning if I was okay. And so I started tripping, and the trip was strong, because this is where I honestly believe it was the most significant trip I've ever had in my life, and one of the most important things that's ever happened in my life. As I was tripping, I was making food, and from behind me in the kitchen manifests my dad, my father, but not as the old man that I recognized him as, but as him when he was he was around 19 years old, 20 years old. I knew what he looked like because he had photos in our home of what he looked like. He looked a lot like me, funnily enough. Of course. And I welcomed him almost like he was like an old friend. And seeing him was such an emotional experience. I could feel just so much. It was a mix of sadness for seeing that this was my last true moment with him, while his spirit has manifested in the room. Happiness because I have this privilege of being with him. And also this feeling of relief that I knew that the suffering was over. I mean, when you have someone in hospice, the anxiety, the weeks of anxiety that you go through is just, it's so crippling, because you're constantly thinking about this person, and it takes you so far away from what you need to do to take care of yourself and your family. And having this privilege of being with him just gave me so much relief, because it was kind of this closure on his life that I think the mushrooms knew that I needed. So anyways, I saw him, and he just immediately said to me, I remember he had his hand on my shoulder as I was cooking, and he goes and says, "Oh, Augustus, I feel young again." Almost as if it feels like he wasn't even aware that he's passed away yet. But I remember as soon as he said that, I just the tears in my eyes just started to flow. And flow and flow and flow and flow. And I turned to him and I said, "That's because you are young again, Dad. Can you see yourself?" And he observed himself. And I said to him, so Dad, what's next? What you gonna do now? And he immediately manifests these 2 suitcases, one on each arm, like the briefcases specifically, and he's like, I'm gonna go travel the world and give myself the experience that I couldn't give myself when I was alive. I knew how much my father wanted to go to Europe and go on a Europe trip to relive his childhood and relive his youth. He came to North America in the 60s and never came back to Europe, which was unfortunate because there was a lot he wanted to show me as a child, but never got around to taking me anywhere. And now that he's passed, he was able to get a hold of that privilege. Unfortunately, not the way that he wanted to initially, but he got it. And then my kitchen suddenly stopped becoming a kitchen and became what looked like the city of, I'm not going to disclose it, but a European city. And there was a beautiful tram, and this tram just drives and stops right in front of us. And my father gets up in the tram, and I remember sending him off, and I said, thank you, Dad. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being my dad, and I love you. Goodbye. And he said goodbye too, and he was like, he kind of told me, he's like, I'll always be here. I'm never really gone. And then the doors closed, and the tram went away, and I was like a sobbing mess. So funny. I was a sobbing mess. And it was like this beautiful sense of relief, this sense of closure that I knew that he was going to be okay. And that was like the most important mushroom trip I've ever had. And then I ate, and I was still tripping. I ate. Food's delicious when you're tripping on shrooms, so it was really good. And I started to feel this really intense body high, and all I wanted to do was just be in my room and cover myself in a blanket and just let the trip take me where I needed to be. So after I ate, I did just that. I just wanted to be in a blanket. I closed my eyes, and then came the visions, part 2. And now this is the funny part. This is the funny part, because I thought this was like kind of entertaining. Out manifested this entity. It was like God in a way, if that makes any sense, but not like God, not like a God, but sort of like this egregorical Yahweh God, Catholic God experience, because he didn't show up as this divinely radiant human perfect being. He manifested as a senior Italian New Yorker man with a Jersey accent, and wearing like a white robe. It was pretty funny. Anyways, he's there, and then he raises his sleeve, and then out emerging from the sleeve is my dad again, but not as this young 19-year-old, but as the older man that I know him as, the man in his 70s. And I just looked at him. I'm like, oh my gosh. And he just gave me this quick glimpse, and then my dad walked up to me as this old man gave me a hug in this trip, and then just kind of went back into the sleeve and back. It was like this God was like collecting him or something. I don't know what it was. Like I'm still trying to find meaning into it. And this God kind of like was trying to give me this like wise guy accented sort of explanation of my life. He's like, this is This doesn't always happen. This doesn't always happen to people around your age. Sometimes it's just life. And you got to understand it was his time, and his time will not always line up with your time. It's just what it is. That's kind of what he sounded like. And it was something, I don't know, I was sobbing as well. My gosh, I was just a mess that day. And I just kind of like let him be who it was. Like, it was like a really benevolent spirit. It wasn't like, I don't know if it was God. Maybe it had been like a persona or like an aspect of some sort of form of divine love that manifested in its appropriate way. Not necessarily to heal me, but to almost, in a way, kind of be entertaining and approach it on a lighthearted note. And after that trip, I got out of it, and it was, just trying to let it gel in my mind and realizing, oh, what a beautiful experience that was. I sent my dad, and, I saw him twice, but I sent my dad out, and I was able to have this beautiful closure of sending off this past loved one. I've lived my entire life with this individual in my life, and I've only been in a fraction of his, which is really funny. Now, just to reveal a little bit more about my life, my father had me when he was in his 50s. So, as you can tell, he had a long life way ahead of me. That's not an early time to have a kid. So, he was a boomer, raising a young man like me. So anyways, that was shrooms for me. And why am I talking about this? You might be asking. Well, there is an occult aspect to this, because during this time when I was working on my, magical practice, I was working with a lot of death. Now, if you don't know who I was back then, I used to be very heavily into necromancy, specifically with Santa Muerte and other entities, specifically Saint Cyprian, or as I know him as São Cipriano. And yes, surprise, surprise, I speak Portuguese. I know there's a few commenters on YouTube that are commenting on my videos in Portuguese, and surprise. Anyways, when it comes to my work, it originated a lot from necromancy. A lot of my businesses and me building my businesses originated from working with Santa Muerte to grow my businesses and start from somewhere. All right, I'm finally back in my office studio, so I'm able to record without much interference. So we're back here. Yeah, working with Santa Muerte, working with death and necromancy helped a lot with my businesses. It specifically brought a lot of how do I explain this? Okay, usually when you work with necromancy, it usually involves communing with the dead. Sometimes it means working on some baneful magic towards a target. But what a lot of people don't know is that necromancy is able to do literally anything. You don't have to just keep it exclusively to one thing. You can not only empower yourself with the powers of necromancy, but necromancy is far beyond just edgy workings with the dead and dead spirits. But rather it is, I honestly think, is a very necessary path to take eventually somewhere down the line of your own practice, because it works with not only spirits of death, which everyone is going to eventually experience in their lives. So it teaches you about your mortality and who you are in this plane of reality. And at the same time, it shows you a way in how to heal your relationships with your ancestral lineage, how to heal with ancestors that you have worked with in the past. So any sort of ancestor work in by proxy, I guess, is a form of necromancy. Now, what this has to do with psychedelics is shamans use psychedelics all the time to contact their ancestors and go on these specific trips. And it's kind of fitting because mushrooms are fungi, and fungi do exactly what they do. They work with the dead. In fact, if there's anything more metal and necromantic than just a psychedelic, it's the fact that the psychedelic is a mushroom. They break down dead material, and they break down things that are dying or rotting, and they're pretty much the natural decomposers and the nature's grim reaper, if I could really find a way to describe it. And the power that these mushrooms have, further beyond than just being these materials that break things down in our ecosystem. The material like psilocybin that we are ingesting in our bodies is also something that gives us these insanely mystical experiences. It makes me wonder if, mushrooms are super intelligent, but just beyond our own understanding in terms of what we would measure as intelligence from a human standpoint. And I think if you this is kind of how I see psychedelics. There's different purposes for things. So for example, if you want to really work with the dead, work with nature, and work within yourself, like internal shadow work, things such as rehabilitating from past trauma, or working on nature magic or evocation with specific chthonic entities, I would think that mushrooms would be probably your best bet. Now, the thing is, if you're going on the path of, say, for example, acid's really interesting because acid is more like the big reset button on your brain. I've said this before. And entity work is it's less with the entities and more with your own work. I would like to think that mushrooms is to your necromancy rites and your necromancy and your works with the dead, whereas acid is your chaos magic. It works with your inner psyche a lot more. I don't think I've really had many entity encounters when it comes to acid. Personally speaking, I saw the visuals, I saw animals and nature, and I'll tell you a little bit about the trip. But when it comes to dialing it down to a practice, I feel like I was drawing more from within myself as opposed to something external. And it's kind of fitting because acid itself is a chemical. It's more like a chemical synthetic drug than say how natural a mushroom is. You literally have to grow it from the ground or from spores or Uncle Ben's rice, as some people would in terms of growing a magic mushroom. But acid is usually created in a lab. Hopefully it's created in a lab where you're getting it. And the way it affects the brain is not like it goes into your digestion and then gets processed through, your liver. It passes through your blood-brain barrier pretty quickly. You put a blotter under your tongue, and within half an hour to an hour, you'll start seeing things. So when it comes to LSD, I had an incredible time. Now, I only took one full dose. I took 1.5 tabs, or I think it was 2 tabs. It's been a while. I think it was either 1.5 or 2 full tabs of LSD for my first trip. This time I had a really good trip sitter. He was a really good buddy of mine. I actually had no idea that he did psychedelics, which is really funny. He's just a really good friend, and I felt very safe talking to him. And I still remember how it happened in the first place. I was talking to him, and I was like completely blitzed on shrooms and totally afraid. And he calls me up, and I'm like, "Hey, bro, I need to be honest with you and tell you, like, I'm having a hard time staying on this conversation on the phone, and just between you and me, if you can, like, just keep it on the down low, I'm on shrooms right now." And he just starts laughing. He's like, "Oh my God, you're on shrooms? Are you serious?" He's like, "What are you taking?" And I'm like, "Oh, golden teachers." It's like, golden teachers, man. And long story short, he was not only open, but he was the right person to talk to. And he told me, he said, "If you want to do acid, I'll be your trip sitter, and let's work on it together, because I know a really good plug, and they make it in a lab. It's as pure as it can get, and I can ensure you that we can have a safe trip, and then we can dedicate a day to this." I didn't really understand what he meant by dedicating a day, but yeah, holy crap, you really have to dedicate a day when doing acid. When you take shrooms, it's like 4 hours, but when it comes to LSD, you're going on a full 12, 16, sometimes 18 hours of a trip. And I'd say, wake up early if you want to experience the daytime. I think I was tripping like the whole day during that day. It was quite the wild ride, and the after effects were just lingering for a while. Now, the trip was incredibly fun. I didn't come super prepared, but my buddy did, and we were going on a walk. And I'll tell you why exactly I think of this as a form of chaos magic. So as we were tripping, we were walking. So funny enough, we were walking to a really nice part of the neighborhood, a really fancy part of the neighborhood. It's kind of it's in between a bunch of really nice playgrounds and parks and nature observatories, and there's like a dike trail where you have the water right by, and like a lot of these homes are gated communities, so they have like security guards waiting outside these beautiful multi-million-dollar townhomes, just setting it up for you. It's beautiful there. So it was a fantastic place to trip, and everyone just sort of keeps to themselves. You don't have to worry about whether or not they think that you're tripping or anything for that matter. People are pretty respectful and kind here. It's mostly old folks. Now, I remember looking around me after tripping, and it was like looking at the world, or looking at the world for the first time in my life again. It was like being born again, and colors, like everything was just so euphoric and beautiful. I was looking at everything as if I never saw a tree before or water before. And I was just looking at things like, wow, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And colors were just so brightly vivid. And I didn't want this feeling to stop, because the wonder that was just going on through my head gave me such a zest for life, and just to try even like the smallest things just to get this rush. And this is where it got a little bit wild. So you almost, like, you're in your body and you're tripping, but you almost remove yourself from the immediate reality in front of you, because you're looking at your life more from a bird's eye view. You are seeing, you're not only observing the world, but you're also observing yourself observing the world, and you start to see it as, oh my gosh, like life is this whole amusement park. It's this whole play. It's this gigantic interactive 4D movie. And here I am living my life, and I have every opportunity, every chance to just try everything. and I'm right here in this park, and I'm finding so much joy in nature and looking at nature. Like, I gotta try other things. I gotta do other things with my life. I gotta go out and experience this movie, this play. I can't just be staying in one place and just looking at the same scene over and over again. And that was this kind of sobering reality that took me out of my day-to-day basis. You know, how we all are usually in this environment. You know, you wake up, eat breakfast, you know, go to work, you work for 8 hours a day, you know, take a break, come back home, lunch, dinner, that sort of thing. You socialize with friends, you socialize with people, and like you entertain yourself for a few hours, whether that's like cheap entertainment like TV or video games. You go to bed, and then that's your life for X amount of years. And you know, for us, like, it's completely normal. And then meanwhile, you have something like acid pretty much coming in and being like, yo, there's so much out there. You could totally explore. You could totally interact with everything and find joy in everything that you do. Why are you just staying in one place? And of course, you know, when reality hits and you're back to normal, you can kind of answer why you're not doing these things. Could be a number of reasons. Number one, maybe you're afraid. Number two, the circumstance just isn't right. Number three, maybe you just don't have enough money to experience these things. So acid really takes you out and just kind of like reinserts you back into your body, but helps you look at the subjective reality. I think it taps into the psyche much deeper on a almost like a psychologist, psychiatrist sort of level of understanding. And that's where I think acid lies. So yeah, walking down this river trail and enjoying the views that I've been experiencing. They're just gorgeous views. I think I never really observed how beautiful a leaf on a tree was until I saw it from the perspective of acid. You gain this profound sense of empathy and unity when you are around living things, like even a plant. You suddenly start to ponder and contemplate on these intricacies, from everything from the leaves, like the chlorophyll in the leaves, the green, the color green in the leaves, the stems, the little veins in the leaves, all these little things that normally you wouldn't be pondering on as much, and you can't help but think about it and just see that this leaf is an extension of this giant living organism. And the role that they play, although so big, the role that they play is so major, yet we only see them subjectively as this thing planted in the ground. And you start seeing people as human beings. You start to see them as people with complicated lives. You know, they're not just walking the streets. They come home to a family. They have their own problems. They have inherited the problems of other people's problems. They work a job. They know Bob down from the street. They have a special place where they shop specifically because of this one odd reason. They have this irrational fear, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's just so many things hitting you out all at once that you can't help but feel for this person. And it's this sense of unity, and you genuinely feel it at your very core. So it's not just ruminating and thinking about it and just stopping to think about it. Like, this is hitting you all at once. So it's kind of the reason why when people take acid, they just feel this immense source of love for everything and everyone. And it's not just coming from these like love chemicals that make you want to love everyone. It's coming from this deep understanding, although triggered by a psychedelic, but it's this deep understanding of other people that makes you feel for them and hold empathy for them. As I'm walking down with my friend and tripping with him, we walked to this really beautiful park, and it's very hilly. Like there's a lot of hills, and there are these like pathways that are surrounded by these very tall reeds. And because this is also partially a nature observatory, there's a lot of special birds that fly around. They have their homes situated on some of these plants and trees. And just a second, excuse me. I just had a coffee and I'm kind of belching a bit. And I remember this one hill, and it was really interesting because as soon as I was there, I was just taken somewhere. And I felt like a part of the veil was being ripped off as I was going through this. So I go up this hill with my friend, and there's a single tree at the very center, at the top of the hill. It's the only tree in there. There's nothing else there. And as soon as I looked at it, I felt the veil being lifted. I was starting to peak a little bit on this trip, and I noticed that I felt like, and the keyword is felt. I felt like I was transported to what I believe was the Garden of Eden. And of course, it wasn't really necessarily the Garden of Eden, but it was this beautiful, beautiful place that I just associated with the Garden of Eden. And for reference, it looks a lot like the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. It's that painting that specifically looks like, it looks just like the Garden of Eden. And that's what I saw, and all the little visuals and everything included. It was very sublime. And I felt like not only was I in this state, I was also kind of observing myself. You know, when you go through shrooms, you see entities. Sometimes you go through this period of transformation inside yourself. LSD was very external, looking at things from a bird's eye view. And I was seeing myself realize that, oh, hey, this is kind of weird. I was observing my life from this standpoint, and here I am looking at my life and saying, oh, I'm in the Garden of Eden and I'm enjoying my life like this, X, Y, and Z. And it occurred to me that, I'm just on Earth, and this veil is being taken out of me, but the truth is, I'm choosing for this to be the Garden of Eden for me, because it is the Garden of Eden for me. I'm living in this intense state of bliss. Now, I was reading 2 books while a little before I took acid. A Course in Miracles, if you've heard of it, and The Complete Reader for Neville Goddard. And they're always talking about how you're living in this state, and heaven is not really a physical place, but rather a state. It's a state of being. And it was confirming a lot with what I was reading through this trip on LSD. And I mean, this was just an episode in my occult practices and working with magic, and this is just the path I was taking. So being transported there was beautiful. Like, just to observe what I'm talking about. Like, I'm just going over some simple observations and things. Like, I'm not going through any sort of cathartic experiences, talking to spirits or anything. Like, everything was just in the mind and internal, despite the fact that I was visually tripping hard on things. We ended up going down the hill and lying down on this really nice picnic blanket that my buddy set. He had a Bluetooth speaker and was playing some music. And oh god, music on acid. Just wow. You feel everything. You can feel music, and it's such a profound experience. I can oh my gosh, I can see why the hippies loved it back in the 60s and the 70s. This stuff is mad crazy. And I remember this is when the peak started to happen. I could hear like this whine of a frequency going in my ear as I was tripping. It was incredibly warm, and I was looking out at the grass and the tall reeds. Like, it felt like I was taken to the Sahara, or not the Sahara, the safari, and I could see. I swear, I was tripping and saw zebras coming in and out of the trees, elephants, giraffes. I saw peacocks and their feathers dancing in crowds, and it was just so wild seeing this. And I don't know what it is. Like, there's some weird connection to nature. Maybe it was tapping into some part, like some really deep-seated instinctual part that we have from an evolutionary standpoint, and maybe it was showing these animals because that's what we can identify and see, etc., as like possible dangers or an old environment that our ancestors evolved through that has taught us how to recognize these patterns. I'm not going to go too deep into it. I was having a fucking awesome time. And as this was happening, starts to come down, and me and my buddy are having a good time. Like, the smells that we would get from nature were just amazing. Everything that we were hearing was amazing, and everything that we were seeing was just funny as fuck. I don't think I've ever laughed this hard, because I still remember it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. There were these willow trees that were on the horizon as we were looking out in the park. And the way that they were slouched over, some of the willows, because they had a little bit of yellow leaves, it looked like hair dangling, like someone's hair was dangling from their head. And these willow trees were in a specific arrangement where when we were tripping, me and him could both collectively see it looked like two wasted white girls holding on to each other and like trying to let one of the girls like puke in the toilet. Like, that's what it looked like. I was like, bro, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Like, those trees, they look like they're holding each other like drunk as fuck. And he's like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one seeing that too. And I'm like, bro, these are literally white girl wasted trees. And we were cackling. Like, we laughed so hard. I don't think my abs got a better workout than that. It was just, it was the funniest shit. Like, it was like the funniest joke in the universe. And we were like talking about how it's like, wow, it's like Earth itself knew what we were going through and wanted to like show us this gift that was this joke through its expression in nature. And it was just it was like this spiritual experience beyond words. And yeah, so we walked back home to my place, and then we had some sandwiches, and by God, they were the best sandwiches I've ever had in my entire life. I don't know what it is with incorporating the five senses on this drug. It was just phenomenal. Made a tuna sandwich taste like a 3 Michelin star meal. It was delicious. And we went back out. This time we approached a different park, and this is where shit got real. So I was lying down, and he asked me this really profound question, and he says, so how does it feel now? How does it feel now that your father is no longer here? Like, I feel like he I don't know if he wanted to ask me that question, but I feel like it was something that pushed us to get to that topic, and it was a much needed topic. And you're going to realize that throughout all three of these trip reports that I'm going to be talking about, all I'm talking about is my dad. So, spoiler alert. And it could, you could look at it like, okay, these are deep-seated daddy issues or whatever it is, but mind you got to understand, this is a grieving period for one of the most important and closest family members that I've known my entire life up to that point. And at the same time, working through the good and the bad that I've had with this person. And for that internal development, for that spiritual and emotional and physical development to go through the use of these psychedelics, like, I'm going to have to meet with these experiences all the time. And truthfully, I don't think it'll ever really go away, because a lot of the shit that we go through is mostly because of the parents that we had, just how we're raised. It's 2024 right now. I mean, look at the topics about trauma and families and parental, and raising your kids and gentle parenting. Like the topics are everywhere. It's all you hear about these days. So my friend asked me this question, and I just thought to myself, I came to this realization that, oh my gosh, like, it's kind of hard to put into words, especially while I was tripping, but it felt like this important person has gone on this vacation or has gone away, but he'll never come back. And it was swallowing this realization that, he's really not coming back. Like, he's gone. And that was something that I finally got to accept. And the reality started to kick in, where I was like, oh shit, like, I'm my own man, like, I'm my own man. I'm growing up. Like, this is, you hear about it all the time, that one day, these people will leave you, but like, holy shit, it's happening right now. So it was very, very challenging, but albeit very much needed to truly absorb. And telling him this was not only very healing, but to have a friend that you trust, I think that's very important. And to hold that space and hold that empathy was what I needed. It was something I needed seriously. So after the trip, he went home, and there's still these minor effects. Like, you're still having this body high, you're still kind of seeing shit on a visual standpoint. And I remember after having a shower and going to bed, I was listening to the audible book of Neville Goddard, and I just started to contemplate about my life and who I was. And I realized that, oh my gosh, like, I really can create anything in my life. Anything that I want really can be created. And it's not necessarily just based off, like, yes, it's partially based off of my own privilege of what I have in my current life, but it also has something to do with the fact that just the realization itself is so valuable, that no matter what circumstance I'm in, I can create something, I can get out of it, I can do something about it. And I was just over the moon about that. And it got me excited. And I was able to see myself in a light where I was actually capable. Now, the thing about self-esteem and all that other stuff, like, that honestly wasn't a thing. Like, I didn't think about my own self-image or self-esteem. Like, I was there already. I was already feeling all these things. I was already that person. So yeah, confidence wasn't a problem. I didn't have to worry or think about like needing confidence or anything. I just felt that I could do everything, which is something I normally couldn't do. But yeah, that was the whole span of the acid trip. There was really nothing magical involved, and I honestly didn't feel like doing anything magical of nature or working with the spirit during that time. It was nothing like that, and I feel like maybe I should revisit it on acid, like try some magic while on acid, but just not at that point where I want to in the first place, and at the same time I'm just not at that point where I think I should be. So anyways, that's just where I am right now, and it was great. It was a great trip. Okay, so with the discussion of my experience of mushrooms and acid, before I get into the whole talk about DMT and my experience with DMT, I want to touch base with all of you on the use of specific psychedelics. Now, this is my belief. I don't think people need to do psychedelics. In fact, I don't think not everyone should do psychedelics. I don't think it's for everyone. And I think a lot of people already know that you could do some serious damage if you're not ready. That's not to fearmonger people, but it's to be aware of yourself as to who you are and know yourself before taking any sort of substance. It goes with, let's say, for example, cannabis. Now, I was a regular cannabis user. I smoked a lot of pot. I mean, so much. I was smoking like 2 ounces a month of weed. I was like wake and bake. I was stoned for a majority of a year one time, and let's just say it didn't negatively affect me to the point where I wasn't doing anything with my life. That's not true. I was still very much functional, but there was just so much more I could have been doing if I wasn't abusing pot so much. Now, I still use it very casually, and I choose to take it on a responsible level. Like right now, I'm pretty sober. In fact, I'm just buzzed on coffee, and I don't plan on taking a smoke. Maybe not even tonight. Maybe not even tomorrow. But rather, just when I feel the need to relax, or I want to do something that involves reaching that state of mind while on pot. But here's the thing: know yourself. You could be someone who could be abusing this or using this as a crutch, or thinking that psychedelics are some sort of magical silver bullet to whatever it is. Like I'm here to break the news to you. It's not. If you think that all the confidence in the world that is preventing you from asking that girl out or making that sale at work is on the other side of going through an intense mushroom trip or going through acid or smoking DMT, it's not. I'm sorry. Like, you have to think of these more as tools to help work on yourself. Think of yourself like a watchmaker, and you can tinker with the watches all you want, but without the proper lenses, you can't see deep enough to know the jewel placements or the gears or the springs or whatever actuators or stabilizers or whatever you call those things to put onto which part of the watch face. And these psychedelics can provide some insight and be used as a lens, but don't jump into a trip thinking that you're going to fix all your shit, fix all your bullshit because you have access to this thing. Like, you gotta understand, it is still sacred medicine, but you're not going to heal yourself properly if you don't have the intention to heal. If you are looking for some sort of spiritual insight through these drugs, sure, go for it, like if that's really what it is. But don't expect you're gonna be cured by the end of the trip, because you could be sorely disappointed. But at the same time, you gotta understand that it's a privilege to be in the presence of these sorts of things, and you are not the driver. You are the passenger of the vehicle that is this substance. So respect that and understand, you're not here to be the backseat driver. You're not here to be the guy who's telling you to give the directions. You're to give the driver your full attention and just let them take you where they want to take you. That being said, with the occult, with using your magic, with my experiences as who I am today, like, because of psychedelics, I want to thank it. Because of psychedelics, I'm able to be more, I guess, grounded in my views of magic. I think, honestly, one of the biggest things that holds us back from creating some crazy results in our lives with evocation or doing any form of magic is your own limiting belief. Okay? It's the same question as to, okay, why, like, you can give the same ritual, the same steps to two different people and they'll get two different results. And you give, let's say, for example, you are working with Beleth, King Beleth, and both people have different ways of how they see themselves and how they view reality. You give them the exact same evocation on how to evoke it. Person who is less confident about their own ability of who they are as a person evokes Beleth and asks them, I don't know, for a girlfriend or whatever it is, and they're severely limited. As far as it goes, as far as this evocation goes, he probably made it to a club and a girl hit on him and they probably exchanged numbers, and that's that. That's really as far as it goes. They might have just talked for a bit or talked for a few months before anything happens. And then person B, who has this interesting view of life, who chooses to see themselves who chooses not to limit themselves on their own beliefs, but believes that true and surrenders to the magic and believes truly that they are a god walking in this human incarnation. And they call on Beleth, and now suddenly they're surrounded by people that have the same vision as he does. He is surrounded by his ideals and his choice of women or sexual partners. He doesn't have to go to the club. There's just people coming to him, and that's just based off of his own belief. It's the same ritual, and Beleth still helped, but it was that internal power that he had within himself that he was able to channel better. And it wasn't because he did some sort of crazy exercise. It was just how he viewed himself. And how you view yourself, how you view your ability is what ultimately decides your success. Anyone can work with mammon. There are people who can make billions with mammon, but there's also people who can just make hundreds with mammon. What's the difference? It's still mammon. It's all internal. And you can change the way you see yourself, either through rigorous self-reflection, seeing a therapist, sure, reading a bunch of books on it, and honestly just getting your hands dirty and just doing a bunch of stupid shit where you will fail and look dumb for a few times, but learn to grow thick skin enough for you to grow into the person that you always meant. You can do that. And then you can also incorporate into your life proper eating, proper diets. Maybe you might even try psychedelics to help get you that extra boost. It's kind of like steroids, really, for self-introspection, because you're no longer limiting your mind to confront things. Like if you realize how resistant your mind is to confronting real life bullshit in your life, you'll notice that it's much harder to change when you are still in the driver's seat of your own brain. But if you're giving that to a psychedelic, they're going to show you that bullshit whether you like it or not. That's kind of the tough love you can get from these things. So my application of magic honestly has increased so much. I think that I really owe it to these substances to boost my potential. I used to have altars on altars. So I have a private study room in one of my in the third floor of my house, and we've got I have altar tables on each cardinal direction. Back then I had like everything, even the floor was covered in ritual circles. I had candles everywhere you could think of. I had wall suspended candle holders, incense burners, you name it. Like I had it. I even had a ceremonial dagger where its handle was made out of like an animal bone. It was super cool, super badass. And I felt like that's all I needed to create amazing results on magic. And now here I am today. I'm as minimal as it gets. I have maybe one small altar now in one of my offices, and I just do work as I go, and I'm creating results beyond what I could do with an altar. It's absolutely wild. And if you were to walk into my office, you would think I'm just some sort of casual practitioner, when the truth is I've worked on this for years. I've been super deep into it, and I still continue to be deep into it. And it was really based off of my own self-image. It was really based off of my own beliefs and limiting beliefs. And I thank the entities that I work with. I thank the substances that I've been working with to get me this far. And I truly hope that if there's one key takeaway that I want you all to understand is on the application of magic and on psychedelics, is psychedelics can be used as a tool for you to better understand yourself and how you apply your own practice. And that's it. That's really it. Your magic doesn't need psychedelics. You can ultimately just work on your own shit and just get better at it. But hey, if you have the privilege to access this kind of stuff, go for it. Why not? But be truly ready to see some shit that you might not be ready to see. Okay. So now let's talk about the actual DMT experience. I have to say, let me just say, very lucky to have access to one of the most psychedelic, hallucinogenic substances known to man. I mean, we all have it. You are pumped with it in birth, and you will go through a huge DMT trip from your own body as soon as you die. And just goes to show how powerful this stuff is. So if you remember what I said about living in the Pacific Northwest, I was really lucky to get a hold of DMT. Now, I pretty much went to this dispensary, and it's one of those shroom dispensaries that are operating in a gray area, and they actually had DMT in two states. You could buy the DMT crystals, like they're like little grains in a bottle, or you could buy a vape. And that was the cool part. It came in a 510 thread vape, hugely popular. If you smoke any vapes, like weed vapes, chances are you've got a 510 thread battery, and that's what it came in. Now, weed itself, it's mostly the resin that you're able to smoke, but DMT in a vape is created in a way in which you put the crystals in this propylene glycol, this PG base, and it would dissolve in this base, and it will make it smokable, like a smokable liquid. And yeah, it's crazy how far we've come. Like, you don't have to buy the crystal and light up in like a glass pipe or a crack pipe for that matter. You can just blast off with something like your vape battery, and it's enough to take you far. Anyways, so that's how I got it, and after I got it, I was terrified of using it. I was incredibly nervous and not really looking forward to, because I was so afraid of smoking this and going through this trip. It was pretty scary, honestly. It's very intimidating, because you can't help but think about, like, oh shit, like, here I have possibly one of the most powerful substances that will completely rip me out of reality, and oh shit, like I don't know what to do. I need to go ask my buddy to come and do it with me. So we were gonna, like, the original plan was I was gonna invite my buddy over to trip with me, so we'd take turns tripping. It was like a 15 to 20 minute trip, so it didn't seem like it was gonna be difficult. And I felt like that would give me some sort of safety, some sort of confidence in myself to take these psychs and have this breakthrough trip. But it never really went anywhere, which is kind of unfortunate. My buddy ended up moving far away for work, and I no longer had a friend that wanted to go and trip with me for something like DMT. It's crazy. It's crazy, intimidating, and scary. But to my realization, I realized that after the trip, I realized that I actually didn't have anything to fear in the first place. There was nothing to be afraid of. And so if you are an individual that is thinking about tripping, you have the substance, and you're just super pre-trip anxiety and jitters, and I'm here to tell you, like, there really is nothing to be afraid of. It's not scary at all. You are gonna be totally fine, and find someone that you trust that will watch you if this is something you feel like you need someone to trip with you, and just observe how you're doing. But honestly, I think you're gonna be fine. So without the right people, I feel like in one way the removal of my friend as a trip sitter was intentional. Like I like to think that these substances have a consciousness of their own. People, there's a thing that goes around. People say that you don't find DMT, DMT finds you, and I truly believe that. So I pretty much looked for a reason to do it. When I realized the reason was right in front of me, it's there. And I felt like DMT was kind of subconsciously telling me, like, hey, you don't need a trip sitter for this. Like, this is all you need. You just need to be comfortable. It took for me to be in a little bit of a emotional crisis to kind of get my head out of my own ass and finally get to doing it. So, all right, let's do it. Let's get this thing started. Let's make a whole thing about it. And I remember going into my office that night. Now I have a beanbag chair, and it's like a giant beanbag chair. If you ever heard of a Yogi Bo, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's awesome because you can not only sit on it, but the way you move in the chair can turn it from a chair to a bed to a bunch of other things, and it's amazing to trip on it. It's amazing to meditate on it. It's amazing to do magic on it. Like it's great. So because I was chicken, I sat down and tried to create a really good environment for myself, and I started to take these small tokes, these really small tokes that I can ease myself into tripping and hopefully break through. The first few attempts, I didn't break through. I tripped a little bit. I got like these visuals while I was open-eyed and could kind of make out what I was could like somewhat make out what I was hearing from these entities as this veil was like slowly dissolving, but it didn't fully deconstruct itself for me to experience it on the full scale. So the first few times were unsuccessful, and I was dilly-dallying way too much. It didn't help that I was taking these abysmally small tokes in between, trying to get something out of it, and then at the same time, the battery would die before I could even swallow my pride and just fucking take that big toke. But yeah, I just never really got to it. Anyways, I reached this point where I think like 2-3 nights in a row I was trying to break through, and I finally managed to get somewhere with it. So I sat down, got really comfortable, and then took one big toke. Holy crap. Just a forewarning, your body will just give up. It's crazy. Like, I was trying to like sit up straight, and then after taking that toke, it just felt like something was pushing me down to just lie down, put your head back up. Hold your head back. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. All right. So I took that toke, and I just lied down onto the beanbag chair, now bed thing. And this is where the occult themes started to really show themselves. Like, this was it. So as my eyes were open and I could see, so I have these curtains, these lace curtains, and they have roses and flowers on them before this is the first thing in front of the window before these blackout curtains I have in my study. And these roses, these flowers that were in the lace, started to breathe and grow into more flowers, and holy crap, I was tripping. I was really tripping hard, and so easily too. The carpet was squirming around and making all these kinds of designs, and I started to see and recognize faces in the curtains of what looked like African tribesmen and these designs of that you would see in quilts of ancient tribes from past societies. Pretty wild. And there's a siren. I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm going to keep talking anyways. And as I was going, I closed my eyes, and it felt like I was in this tunnel being taken all over the place in this dark black tunnel, and there was like no gravity, so I was going like up and down and over and under these intricate like tunnels, and it felt like I was going through this chamber into the underworld, and I started to hear some drumming, and the drums were very rhythmic, and then the Gede were there. It was shocking, like these humanoid, or actually they looked very human people with skeleton, with a sort of a skull design on their face was there. I don't know if who I was seeing was Baron Samedi or something, but like I could see he was like really serious on taking me on this journey, and he was drumming as he was going, and he's like, come on, push further, take another toke. And I was like, what? You want me to take another toke? You want me to go further? He's like, push further. You're already here right now. You might as well push further. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Opened my eyes, and I stood up again, and took another heavy toke. And I started to freak out because it was overwhelming. It was scary. And I was like crying out like, oh God, like, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Like, I just got to remind myself I'm going to be fine. Like, there's nothing to worry about. I even, like, it's so funny. I was like, man, maybe I should call on Jesus or something. So I called on to Jesus, and then all of a sudden his face pops up, and he's like, keep going. And I'm like, oh shit, he's saying I should keep going. So I went and took that final big ginormous toke. And then after taking that big toke, I was just blasted off. I didn't know where I was, but I was transported into what looked like a like a yellow room, and it was like I knew where I was, but how I knew, I don't know, but I knew I was in this area, in this kind of a healing / operating room, and I wasn't really sure like how they did their stuff. But anyways, I was in this room and I was lying down, and then I could hear these voices that sounded female, and they were speaking some sort of a language, like some sort of alien language I could not understand. But one thing was for sure, I could understand the feelings more so than the words, and I could feel from what they were saying was compassion. It was like this compassion for me, and this sense of empathy for me, and love, which was really interesting because obviously, like, I've never met these entities before, but here they were. And then out comes this spider goddess entity who I knew who it was, and she comes into me. She comes into the room, and she's like, this giant spider goddess comes in, and she's like, "Hey, I know it's your first time here." She says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'm gonna take care of this. Just relax. You're in no danger. You're safe here. I'm going to work on you, okay?" And so I was just like, well, all right, surrendering to this experience. All right, go for it. And then she starts to pick at my body, and she starts grabbing what looked like these gray hexagons or pentagons and octagons. And as she's pulling them out of me, she's eating them. And she seems to be like consuming some sort of these blockages or whatever it is that's within me. And I could feel like, oh wow, this is like really nice. Like, this is very soothing, and I feel lighter the more she does this. And as she's working on me, she goes and she looks at me and she says, "You know me, don't you?" And I'm like, yeah, I do know you. I remember hearing about accounts of people seeing this spider goddess, or even like mantis, like praying mantis surgeons. I couldn't really tell what it was, but I'm certain she was like some sort of a spider goddess. And then it occurred to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Sephron's. Like, this is Sephron's. Like, this is her. And I'm just thinking this, and she immediately picks up on what I'm thinking. She's like, "Yes, but not exactly." And I'm like, "What?" She says, "Well, I'm here to heal you, and I'm here to work on you. You can call me Devimi." And I'm like, "Devimi," and the spelling of the word just appeared on the back of my head. DVIMI, Devimi, and I was like, oh, interesting. So this is like an aspect of a healing aspect of you. And she's like, yeah. And she says, you're gonna be fine. She says, I'm finished working on you. You're gonna be okay. You're free to explore and do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. So this is where the profound experience comes in. Because usually when I hear about these DMT trips, when you surrender, you don't really get to explore or do whatever it is that you want. Most of the time, you're at the mercy of the trip, and the trip takes you where it wants to take you. But this time, I wasn't being flung around it's my first trip, and I wasn't being taken anywhere specific. Like, I just landed in this place, and I was able to go anywhere I want in hyperspace. And I just thought, oh, okay, well, I knew what I needed to do. I knew what I had to do. When you're in the astral, you can just will yourself somewhere, and you're there. it's kind of the same in hyperspace. If you ever find yourself fully capable of moving around hyperspace and not having, like, you're not being taken or washed away by the trip, I thought to myself, oh, okay, what can I do here? Oh, okay, I know what to do. I'm gonna go see God. That was the first thing that popped up in my head. I was like, I'm gonna go see God. So I don't know what it was, but I had the balls to decide that I wanted to go see God. I guess in this sense, I was going to see Yahweh in this case. I guess that was just the default that I went to. All right. And immediately, as soon as I made that will to show up, I was immediately transported to the doors to this celestial throne room. I was in this hallway of brilliant, like, it looked like bronze and copper and gold. Like, it was like gold, but it was also like orangey brownish, but like in the most beautiful sense, like something otherworldly in terms of this metal. And as soon as I'm about to step in through the doors of this throne room, I was immediately blocked by a bunch of Ophanim, like the biblically accurate angels. You know, the wheels within wheels, covered in eyes, the whole getup. And it's my first time ever seeing them, and I'm like, oh fuck, like this is really freaky, like. And they immediately were like, nope, you are not going through these doors. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you're not ready. You know, you're not ready for this. It's still your first trip. You're still, you know, you're just not in that state where you can go and go through these doors. We're not going to let you. So you're going to have to look elsewhere. I'm like, okay, geez. So I wanted to respect that, and I figured, okay, whatever. I'll let that happen. And then I ended up, I don't know where I ended up again, but I was somewhere far, far away from that. And then I thought to myself, well, okay, well, as this trip is going on, what can I possibly be doing? And then it occurred to me, and I thought to myself, well, just like I did in the last mushroom trip, I really want to go talk to my dad. And just out of nowhere, I could immediately hear his voice call out to me, like as if he was calling me on the phone. And I hear his voice, and he's calling out my name, Augustus. And I'm like, oh my God. Just like that, like I just was so shocked that it was so easy to talk to him. I didn't have to do anything. I'm like, Dad? Oh my God. Where are you? What's going on? And he's like, hey, I'm here. Like, you called on me. Like, I'm here. Are you okay? And immediately, as soon as he said that, I started to cry. I started to bawl. The tears came in. Like, you know, you'd think that you were, you know, kind of over it, that you've grown. It's been a number of years since he's passed, and you think that you're going to just be fine, but then it all hits you again, and it all comes back to you. And I was like, oh my God, Dad, I can't believe you're here. Like, and then he went from being just a voice to physically manifesting as himself, specifically in wearing the same clothes that he did among his last months being alive. And I was like, I told him, like, I'm fine. I mean, I guess I'm fine, but what are you, like, how are you? Like, what are you doing in here? Like, what have you been doing lately? Well, you know, after you passed. And his response was, well, I can't really tell you because it won't make sense to you. You know, what I did in my human life being alive is not the same as being here and not living a human experience. I can't really describe to you what I have been doing. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's fair. And then all of a sudden, like, as if external from me, these deep-seated subconscious feelings I had reserved for my dad, but never got to really have for him while he was alive, it just sprung forth, and the stage was set. Like, this was a moment for me to truly get some closure and interact with my dad. And I told him, I said, Dad, I'm sorry. Like, I told him, I said, I wish I appreciated you, and I wish I spent more time with you while you were still alive. I wish I wasn't so determined to pursuing my life so much that I ended up not really interacting with you much within your last years of your life, and I wish I appreciated you and showed you how loved and how grateful we are for having you in our lives. And I'm saying this as I'm like crying, and like the tears just won't stop falling. And he understood, and this is the part that really shook me, because he goes and he says, he goes to me and says, like, I understand, and I wish that while I was alive that I was more of a loving father to you. I wish I wasn't so, I wish I could realize this. He's like, I'm only realizing this after I passed, and he feels this, like, I could feel like there's like a sense of shame as he's saying this. And he's saying, I wish I knew this while I was still alive. He says, after you pass, there's just so much clarity in the things that you are, because you're no longer human and bound by your own limitations as a human. He's like, I wish I was so much kinder to you. I wish I was more of a loving and present father for you. I wish I appreciated you and just showed you how proud I was of you, and how much I really wanted to voice that. He says, I'm sorry I wasn't the father that you needed. But and then he says, but I'm so lucky to have you as my son, and I'm so lucky that I got to be your dad while I was alive. He's like, I would do it again over and over, and for that, I'm so lucky that you were my kid. And I'm just like, oh fuck, like, it was just so heavy to hear that. And I told him, I said, Dad, I love you, and I forgive you, and it's fine. I understand where you're coming from. And he told me to pass on this message to my mother and to my sibling. And he's like, just tell your mother how sorry I am for treating her so horribly while I was alive. I just didn't know, he said. I just didn't know. I just wasn't aware of what I was doing. And just let them know that I'm okay. I'm truly at peace, and I'm doing my own thing. Not really his word, but he says, he was doing whatever he's doing. And he asked me, he's like, oh, so Augustus, what have you been up to? And I told him, I said, well, Dad, after you passed, I met someone, and and she lived with me for a while, and things weren't so good, and it kind of ended, and it just hasn't been the same. It just feels so empty without the family that I knew. And he was like, you know what, that's just people for you, like, you gotta understand, like, things, if it's yours, it's yours. If this person was meant for you, they're meant for you. He says, don't worry about it. You have time. You're young. You still have your career and your everything else ahead of you. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. But like, and he's like, you you are going to do big things with your life. You're going to do things bigger than you could even imagine. And I just looked at him like, oh, come on, Dad. Like, what do you, why are you saying this? Like, what do you mean? What makes you say that so confidently? And then, I just cried after he did this. I could feel his hands touch my shoulders. Now, mind you, I'm not seeing any crazy colorful visuals. Like, I'm actually just seeing him in the flesh in hyperspace. And he goes, I know this because you're my son. I know this because you're my kid. And I'm proud of you, as of who you are. And I just fucking lost it. I was just crying hysterically. Just, this huge emotional weight has just lifted off my shoulders, and I just felt lighter as I was crying, and just so many tears, just crying and crying after hearing that. It was like, when you grow up with a father that never really tells you that he's proud of you, or really ever shows any sort of doesn't really accept or praise you for what you do, and then like you finally get that recognition. Like it's such a feeling. Like, it just made all the stuff that I did just worth it in the end. And it just made me realize, oh my God, how much I actually chased his validation and approval when I pretended like I didn't. But it meant everything to me to hear that from him on this sacred medicine. And I was just bawling, and I'm just like, thank you, thank you, Dad, for everything that has happened, and I forgive you for what you have done. If it wasn't for what's happened, I wouldn't be living the life I am living right now. So thank you. Just a lot of thankful gestures and just gratefulness. And I could already start to feel like there's a come down coming, like I'm about to wake up from this. And my dad says, he's like, you know what? You know how to reach me. You know where to call me. That's what he said. You know where to call me. And he says, I'm never really not there. I'm actually always there. I'm always around. And I'm just a call away if you need me. He says, don't worry. And I said, thank you, Dad. Okay, then I'll see you soon. I'll see you sometime soon. And, thank you for everything. And it's great to hear from you again. And then he just faded back into whatever plane of existence that he was on. So that was my DMT trip. I woke up a sobbing mess, and it was nothing like how other people would describe it. I think this is why when it comes to DMT, everyone's trip is somewhat similar to everyone else's, but is also unique to their own. I wasn't I was expecting the full scale trip where everything is fractals and entities and hyperspace and elves, but instead I had this sequence of meeting an aspect of an entity healing me and doing this sort of spiritual surgery on me, and me having the liberty and the privilege of being able to explore hyperspace, mind you, on my first trip, and go around and attempt to go to the throne room and be blocked, and then have the privilege of speaking and communing with the dead in such a sober manner. And you think that I thought it was going to be surrender to the trip and have this breakthrough experience and see what the world has there for me. And that was what I was expecting and kind of genuinely terrified of. But instead, this substance came to me like a loving friend and just opened up this world of love and care, and almost like this, like, hey, you want to check this out? Like, it was beyond what I experienced. Will I have the same trip again? No, 100% no. I doubt it. I think next time I'm going to trip, I probably will be in hyperspace, and I probably will have to surrender to the experience. But wow, what an experience that was. I think about it every single day. And to say that it was like, yeah, it's crazy. Every single trip on these psychedelics, I have to say, is one of the most significant, important, pivotal moments of my life. And I don't say that lightly. And a lot of people who do these kinds of things also say the same thing, and they don't say that lightly either. So it's really interesting because I experienced a plethora of things. I did like 2 times I was working with a form of necromancy on DMT. I met the Gede and I met my dad. I literally went into the underworld. I experienced Baon Samedi, or who I believe was Baon Samedi, or one of the Gede, and interacted with them. And then I also experienced a form of healing by Sephirons in a whole, that was kind of hyperspace. Like I was in some sort of place and had this healing session with her, and then I had this experience of like, I guess in a way I was going through the tunnels up in the Tree of Life and reached I don't know, Keter. Like I literally just reached the throne room and got blocked by a bunch of angels, but still, like, to have that kind of control and that privilege is mind-blowing. And then to be transported into this unknown realm of some sort and once again interact with my dad, I guess, it's just wild. I was reflecting before I was making this episode to talk about all these experiences, and I just thought to myself, wow, my dad is this recurring theme all the time. Like, am I just operating on these unresolved daddy issues? But then I realized that the significance was, it was because of him, honestly, that I started to take this journey of psychedelics. And he's become less of just my dad and more of like a guide, an ancestral guide that has played a huge role in my life while he was alive. So I was able to resolve a lot of the earthly shit, but also have a glimpse of what was beyond. And that was an intense ritualistic experience. And it's really funny because after that trip, things just started moving at hyperspeed. Like, my life just started to take a huge turn, and like, and in a way in which, like, you got to do some fucking rituals for that kind of stuff, and you got to evoke some entities for that kind of movement or that kind of coincidence after that. So I knew for a fact there was something deep within me subconsciously that I was doing that was way beyond my conventional magic. Would I do it again? Absolutely, 100% yes, but not anytime soon, simply because I just need some time to let this thing gel over and work on my own shit while I'm working on this. And you know me right now, like, in this state of this channel, I still had this Asmodeus video to finish, and it's, oh my god, it's much longer than I expected, and editing is actually not easy. But realizing that, hey, I want to make this content and create some stuff for this channel, because I don't want you guys to be waiting forever for these episodes. I'd rather create something and speak my mind. Like, this is still my channel at the end of the day. So with that, I wanted to create this episode called Augustus Talks, because I want to share with you experiences outside of, thinking outside the box of conventional magic. So when it comes to something like psychedelics and the occult, I'm still relatively new to psychedelics myself. And when it comes to my own magical practice, I feel like it confirms a lot with what I work with. I mean, I've worked with the dead, so it shouldn't be a coincidence that the dead are working with me while I'm tripping. And should go the same for other people who who are also working for the dead that are also tripping. And I think that at the end of the day, like my biggest takeaway, my biggest conclusion is psychedelics are not a necessity, but they are a powerful tool, not only for deep introspection with yourself, but to be able to lift off the veil much easier. You know, some people need to train their eyes or their third eye, for example, and to be able to see physical manifestations of certain entities with evocation. Yeah, you can do that, but you can also do acid or shrooms or trip on DMT, and that shouldn't be used as an alternative. Honestly, I think it's just a gift and a privilege to use that, and that's how it should be treated. Like, you should be very grateful that you have access to something like this. But it's not something to replace your own self-development, your own personal development. I still believe that skill and your practice should be improved upon. Like, you should improve on your methods. I really want to drive it home. Like, please, psychedelics, they're not the answers to your problem. They're not magical silver bullets to tackle situations. They are tools. And I need to emphasize on that. They are tools. They are tools that you can use, that you do not need, but you can use. Do I believe that everyone should take psychedelics at least once in their life? Absolutely. I honestly believe that. I think we all deserve to have that experience and opportunity to see what's beyond, but at the same time, not to have people see it as this only way of reaching some sort of spiritual perfection or whatever it is that they're aiming for. I made that mistake originally. So I'm speaking about this, I guess in a way I'm sort of projecting that I originally looked at psychedelics as the answer to my problems. I originally looked at psychedelics as a silver bullet to my issues. I originally looked at it as in the ultimate magical tool that I'm going to be using forever and ever and become super powerful and successful using it. Like that was really my thinking back then, but I was so wrong in thinking that. So if you are looking at this video and you're considering thinking that psychedelics can be this kind of thing, I'm telling you, they're not. It's not. And if you're coming in with that expectation, I'm not going to say prepare to be disappointed, but prepare to have that worldview shattered, and prepare to get quite the spiritual beating in that sense, lovingly at least. And that was pretty much my experience with DMT. There's been a few thoughts when it comes to entity encounters on DMT, because there's a lot of people sharing the same encounters and experiences, like machine elves, like I've described earlier. But when you look from an occult perspective, it's not like you see any accounts and grimoires for these sorts of entities like machine elves. And this is kind of my idea. This is kind of what I think is the reason why. You see, it just goes back on the whole idea of the multi-layered reality that we live in, and us only being able to see certain layers of that reality. And what needs to be understood and addressed is a lot of our gods, the spirits, the goddesses, the entities, are earthly in nature a lot of the times. They usually represent something within our solar system or something within the general area that we're in. You see that certain entities represent the planet Venus or the planet Jupiter or Mars or Pluto, but they don't really, it's not like they're representing, I don't know, Kepler 452b or something, which is super Earth exoplanet, like far, far from us. You know what I mean? So you can't say that there aren't spirits or living beings in there. And so this is my thought onto it. Hyperspace is almost this gigantic collective where we can access and interact with different aspects of the entities that we work with, and they will take on different names, universal names, that they may be recognized on another planet or another solar system or wherever intelligence is. And it's like a universal key. Like, for example, maybe Lucifer, for example, we call him Lucifer, we identify him as Lucifer, and that's usually based off of like a textual mishap, because we're fucking humans, and we just choose to identify this god with Lucifer based off of some random obscure text. There's names. There's a bunch of names. Maybe Lucifer might be working with entities and other people on different planets or other aliens or whatever that is, and they may address them as a different name or in a different style. And hyperspace, I like to think, is like this main hub where you have these universal names of these entities, and they have Earth names which we refer them to, and this is how we would address them. So the entities that we're experiencing in hyperspace, specifically like, I don't know, machine elves or whatever it is out there, like maybe we aren't interacting with them much on the earthly level because they're just independent of their own kind of stuff, and maybe we just don't want to there's just no reason to do much magic with them. But they exist. Like, I would assume like these other entities exist, and we can call on them. And so, because it's such a wild west in that hyperspace, it's not like we mapped it out. Who knows? Decades later after this, there might be people out there writing entire books on mapping out DMT hyperspace and their interactions with specific entities and how to call on them, what they specialize in helping for us in this human experience, all that kind of stuff. And I say this because it's been done before. I mean, a lot of the spirits that we have encountered in ancient times, a good amount of them were probably through the use of a psychedelic trip, and then were given a sort of a tether to this mortal world in this plane due to the collective consciousness or unconsciousness of other practitioners that interact with that entity. And I think it's almost egregorical in a way. It's almost like it's not egregorical. I like to think that, when people create egregores in this plane of existence, you're creating this quote unquote artificial spirit by giving it life, by exposing it to the world and letting the attention give them the energy. I like to think that these spirits have always technically existed in the hyperspace, in this infinite vastness, and that we are giving them form by creating this egregore, but they are their own independent spirits. Like they've always existed, but it's just that we're giving them almost like a shell to operate in, like a robot body to operate in. I don't have much else to talk about when it comes to applying psychedelics in the occult, because what's been said, what I can say has already been said in books. The foundations of religions and spirituality and our own human development and evolution have come from the use of psychedelics. If you've heard of the stoned ape theory, I mean, that's a huge thing that's just been visited on, that the possibility of our rapid expansion in evolution, the rapid expansion of our brains might have been occurred through the use of ingesting like a shit ton of psychedelics in the development of humankind. And it truly could be anything. So I'm just here to show you like a dialogue about what I think about psychedelics, about my experiences and sharing. It's up to us collectively to share these experiences and make something out of it. We can't necessarily rely on the use of old grimoires forever. We have to make do with new information that gets released on the daily. Don't forget, like, a lot of people seem to bash on UPG a lot. And I think people are forgetting the fact that all gnosis starts off as UPG. I mean, for crying out loud, the whole Goetia can technically be a form of ancient UPG that just ended up being collectively confirmed by other people. And I think that's just going to be the case. People will have to exercise these experiences and try them out with from their own perspective. So maybe I'll channel some sigils. Maybe I'll go into hyperspace again and try to bring something back for everyone else to try. I think that it adds a little bit more flavor and excitement into the exploration that is channeling sigils and working with entities. It does open up to a possibility of some dangers, of course, but that's always existed, even independently from psychs. You know, I've pretty much realized that. Anyways, with that being said, I want to close this talk and address you, the viewer / listener, that you are on a journey yourself. And whatever you make of that journey, I hope that you're able to explore it to the full extent of what you intend to explore it as. If that means taking a substance just to shift your idea of reality, you know, power to you. I hope you find what you're looking for. And I think when it comes to the occult, we can't be completely bound to these books that we have to explore. We have to explore, honestly. So I couldn't say that I brought much from hyperspace right now, but I hope I end up bringing in more, because all I got was a name of an aspect of Sephiroths. And I think that when it comes to like looking for other entities and whatnot, like, I don't know if I'll have control over that, but you know, I'm gonna try. I'll try to do something out of it. But like DMT for me originally, it wasn't for occult exploration, so I could go like a miner in the mines, you know, looking to grab the next piece of gold to bring out and sell. Like I'm here to submit myself to the lessons that I want to learn, and I won't always get something out of it. So I can't promise you that I'm just going to look into hyperspace just to get things for content. That's not what I want to do. Rather, I want to respect this medicine properly and treat it like it is. It is a medicine, and you know, I'm not gonna treat it like it's some sort of cheap way to get some information for you guys. It's just not my style. I'd rather work with what we have right now. Anyways, that's Augustus Talks Part 1, and I hope you enjoyed my commentary on psychedelics. It may not be what you've been looking for, but this was something I've been wanting to share for a while. Now, there's a few things I want to talk about. I've been getting requests for specific services on doing magic and other sorts of practices. Now I won't do magic for you guys, unfortunately. I won't do any evocation for you guys. Mainly being I have a set, group of local clients within my area that I work with on a full-time basis, and I myself, I'm not going to take on an online presence in that way. However, what I can do instead is offer you my services of sigil channeling, which I have been doing, and give you guys a little bit of an opportunity to channel a sigil for a specific entity that you've been wanting for a while, or forever, for some sort of purpose that you want. So I'm going to give you guys a multitude of options if you really want to work with me. So I have an Etsy link that's going to be in the description for a custom sigil channeling that you can try. And then at the same time, I have a Ko-fi page. You can feel free to donate towards the channel, and those donations will go towards a good cause. I'll do my best to improve this channel and use that to fund specific operations in the channel. If you really want, there's a shop in the Ko-fi page for a consultation, for a chat. They start at $50 if you want to chat with me and troubleshoot whatever it is that you're going through. Likewise, once again, not offering any sort of magical services. I'm just here to give you an opportunity to pick at my brain if you really need to. But that will be in the description as well. Anyways, thank you so much. This was completely unscripted and raw. I've burped a few times and have taken long pauses through this chat, but I found a lot of pleasure into doing this because without having a script, without having any sort of thing written, has given me the liberty to fully express how I feel without confining myself to trying to make myself sound good. I care more about the being real with you than working so hard on the delivery. You either get it or you don't, and if you don't get it, then honestly it's fine. You're not missing much, really. I do make it a point to make sure that the important parts are as clear as day. So, with that being said, I want to also extend a hand. So if you run a sort of a podcast, an online podcast, or you do anything along the lines of interviewing certain occultists, I would say feel free to reach out to me if you want. If you have any questions or concerns, or you want to just pick at my brain, that's also a possibility as well. Independently of the Ko-fi page, I'm more than open to doing podcasts, and I take a lot of joy into doing that. So anyways, this is Augustus Grigori from Augustus Talks, the first episode of Augustus Talks, signing out. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day. Bye now.